How do you call someone a slut without slut shaming?
Exactly. Next question, right?
Hi, welcome to Unboxed. My name is Ace, and I'm a real life human. And I'm joined by my co-host.
Hi, I'm Wes with Casey Care.
Hi, Kimberly Carlson, Senior Clinical Researcher at Cerner. I work on the HIV outpatient study, the longest running cohort study, the HIV persons in the United States that started in 1993. What else? I'm a Filipino American, and I serve on the National Association of Asian American Professionals board as their Director of Social and Cultural Events.
Yes. Hello, I'm Chris. I am the Director of Events for Stonewall Sports Kansas City here. We are the LGBTQ plus sports league here in Kansas City.
And
So our topic today, this week, this month, this day, this hour, what is this?
Well, for this month, we're focused on racial injustice. And
This is the list for the moment. You guys interviewing what to say. I actually talked to him yesterday to do this. But we were talking all month with we talked to the Black Panther Party here. We talked to a few other organizations too, and it's such a difficult topic to talk about. But just all of Unboxed is all the topics that we talk about kind of are a little difficult and kind of taboo. But even money, we want to talk about things that really should be normalized and that we shouldn't really be afraid of, because a lot of people are in the same situation. A lot of people feel the same way, and having voices that you can identify with and people you can identify with is very, very important.
I feel like most Americans just know very little about Asian American history or how immigration policy has affected Asian American history or any of the major historical moments that have, the internment camps or the Chinese Exclusion Act or things like that. So that is something that is not included in school curriculums a lot of time, and people, including Asians themselves, don't even learn about it until they're much older. So there's just very little known by the general public about the Asian experience in general or the history of Asians in the United States.
So is that something that you've gone through with your studies and just growing up Asian, or is it something that your family really taught you, that you talked about, that was kind of ingrained in your ancestral history?
No, definitely as I was older. Growing up as an Asian person in the Midwest in the 80s, 90s, you just want to fit in and wish that you're blonde and wish that you had bigger eyelids, and it was, erasing. I mean, I am part white and part Asian, so really just kind of wanting to erase that Asian part of me. Going to school with one other Asian person, I think, at my high school, 250 people, and 5 or less African Americans at a public high school in Topeka. So, just very little. Somebody asked me about Topeka, what was it like to grow up there? And at the time I thought, oh, it's fine. I could walk to school. The education seemed fine. And I was thinking that I said it wasn't diverse, but it's actually segregated, like Kansas City. It's very segregated spatially.
How was the dynamic growing up, being Asian and having those thoughts and those feelings and looking around your surroundings? I mean, how was that in your family? I mean, I think, even there may be some things you can hide, but there's also, you can never hide your family. You can never hide the traditions and things that your families do at home. Once you get older and your friends start coming over, and, I grew up too with my dad, and my dad, when he was younger, he worked in the fields a lot. He was he's from America. My grandparents are too. My great-grandparents are indigenous, immigrants or whatever. But my dad was really, really, really dark skinned. And so as I got to middle school and high school, I would have friends who were oh, I didn't know your dad was black. And I was well, my dad's not black. But also that's interesting that you would even think that that would be a conversation that you should have with somebody, or a question that you should ask. But also feeling a little insecure, because growing up, obviously being gay, obviously being brown, you don't want to be different when everyone else seems to assimilate, and you're just kind of always trying to nudge it. So I remember times too that I would be thankful that my dad was out of town working, so he wouldn't come to a function, so I wouldn't have to explain that part of my culture, my heritage. And now that I look back, I feel so horrible for being like that. But as a kid, the worst thing you want to be is embarrassed. So how are those for you?
I was definitely not embarrassed about my mom, who was from the Philippines and immigrated here in her early 20s. She's, very glamorous and fashionable. She actually just passed away 2 months ago, so I've been thinking about her a lot. But even then, I participated in all sorts of, Filipino dance troupes, and we belonged to the Filipino Association in Topeka, which you wouldn't think there would be that many, but because of nearby army bases and things like that, there was hundreds of people. So even though those weren't my friends at school, and I just wanted to be friends with the popular people at school, I had that community. It was just very separate. It didn't interact with my friends at school, never. But I loved the food. Even though my dad is white and grew up on a farm in Illinois and did not really like Asian food. And he said, my mom was the first Asian woman he ever saw. And he was also would make racist comments about African Americans. And me and my brothers would be like, what is the difference between an African American and mom? Because we just didn't understand when we were so young. He said he wouldn't want us to watch The Cosby Show, and we were like, what? They're like, what? And he could never give us an answer, and we were so confused about race. It was confusing.
Were those conversations as you got older something that you were able to have with your father, or you just?
Yeah, not as fully as I would have liked to. I mean, I was reading his PhD thesis from when he was, in his 30s, and it was all to his family about how they eventually accepted his wife, because they, I guess, were not accepting of her in the beginning because she was different. But then you think, why did you have those views about The Cosby Show?
They didn't internalize his views to alter his perceptions.
Were you able to ever talk to your mother about that, about her not being accepted by his family and what that felt like for her? And I mean, you said she immigrated over when she was 20. That traveling is huge when you're young, but also leaving your whole entire culture for another culture is
Right.
especially at that time in the world.
I felt like she was so brave. She just had this feeling that she needed to be in the United States. She was in med school, she had 1 more year to go, and she, I guess, locked herself in a room for 2 weeks until her mom agreed to send her here. And there was 5 other kids, and she was the youngest. And her mom was like, okay, fine, if you find some place to accept you. So she got a lab tech job in Rockford, Illinois at some Catholic college. And my dad was working there in the summer.
Rockford, Illinois.
Yeah.
She was a peach.
Yeah. But I'm like, she just hopped on a plane and didn't know anyone in America.
Wow.
And just went and did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm assuming she's one of your heroes because she sounds like somebody that would be one of my heroes. That's incredible. So did she adopt a lot of American culture and traits, or did she still bring a lot of her Filipino traits?
I think a lot of American culture she adopted, especially because she wasn't with her family. The rest of her siblings ended up immigrating to the Bay Area, so we would go there to visit all the time. But I've also lived in the Bay Area. I got my master's at Berkeley, so being there, you are just one of a million Asians or half Asians, and you just feel like, oh, well, this is what it's like to live in California and not feel like the minority. Even applying to school there, I would usually put Asian and know I'm the minority, but at Berkeley, it's kind of a tie of 40-some% each Asian and white, so you can't really.
Wow. So you're 100% though, or 80%.
Yeah.
Math is so hard.
But since she was isolated from the rest of her family. Going to holidays with our extended family, there was 75, 80 people of just the cousins and the siblings and but in Topeka.
Did you grow up on Asian food or American food? I feel like it's so weird that your dad would be like, I don't like Asian food. I'm like, well, bitch, that's all I cook.
I know.
What are you gonna eat?
I mean, it was a mix. She did not know how to cook even rice when she moved here because she was the youngest, so she didn't really have to cook. So she kind of just bought every cookbook. She had a huge cookbook collection and ended up being a cooking teacher, and she could, carve food into a million different things. And
Wow.
she won all these cooking prizes, but she just taught herself by buying cookbooks in the 60s and then teaching herself everything. But a lot of that was 60s casserole, So it was a mix. But her cooking is what I miss. Yeah, her cooking is what I miss the most. And I'm thinking, I should have got more recipes down, but she just has like that knack, and I don't have the knack of throwing whatever together and it tastes amazing.
It definitely takes some talent. I have not cooked either the past few months that I've not been working. I've been like cooking my meals and like reading a bunch of cookbooks, and I'm pretty smart. I can figure this out, but yeah.
You made some good meals.
So like it's trial and error, but yeah.
Just get
Those
those like
edible.
Hello Fresh or something.
Yes.
So my experience is actually completely different. I was gonna say, so I also am half. So I'm half South Korean on my mom's side, and then my dad, I'm pretty much just say white. He's like part Hispanic, white. He's a little mix of everything. I don't know, but I just say
Is he single?
he's not. He's taken. He's been married for
I'm okay with that.
10 years now. But I grew up without my mom, so without all the culture. So my dad and my mom got divorced when I was a baby, and then my mom moved away, started a new family, and she went back to South Korea. And so I didn't grow up with my mom, so I didn't grow up with any of the culture, any of the traditions, and so I kind of felt isolated because I didn't have anyone to really talk about all the culture and stuff with. So as I got a little bit older, I actually found this Korean church, and so I just went to like a Korean church to try to integrate and get to know people and more about my culture, and then just as I grew up, just kind of learning more and more about it.
What denomination?
So we were Lutheran, technically.
Oh, so do they have a Korean Jesus?
I think they did. I don't know. That's so long. I've kind of like heard.
Because I grew up Catholic, but like our Jesus was definitely white. Which is why
I'm pretty sure their Jesus was white.
I follow no other white man. I'm good. Bye. Take your bread back. I'll take that wine.
Do they have potlucks at church?
Oh, that was
Korean.
my favorite part. That was my favorite part.
Wow.
So
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you... So how was that with your family? Like, they were just like, oh, have fun at church. Have fun at Korean church. And you're like, bye.
Yeah, pretty much. Did
they ever come with you or like talk about it? Or religion, I feel like it's such like a... It could be a sore button for a lot of families. It could be like a hot button. So it's very interesting. It's also interesting, like, I don't know, gay culture and queer kids go to church. Really?
Yeah.
Right.
I love that story, but like... was it about religion for you? Was it about just like being around people that you felt like you could identify with and wanting to understand and learn a little bit about like more of your heritage?
It was about identifying with people and being like able to be relatable with them. Like I would just sit through there and be like, oh, I don't believe, and then the potluck would happen and I can interact with people. Try with food to my people.
Was the not in Korean?
No. So it was still English.
Do you speak Korean?
I don't speak Korean. I would love to though.
Do you speak? Is it Tagalog or?
I do not.
Is that what it
I
is?
thought about it though.
It's not Filipino.
Yeah,
it's called like
Tagalog.
Tagalog. Yeah.
Because it sounds so familiar to me, but I can't speak it. But I feel like I would be able to pick it up very quickly.
Did your mom speak it around you, or?
I mean, not really at home because my dad. So yeah, on the phone, and of course we only cared about learning all the cuss words.
Right. Yeah.
That makes sense.
But
Were you able to ever reconnect with your mom or your mom's side of the family at all?
So yeah, when I was about 23, she reached out to me on Facebook Messenger.
Oh, she reached out to you.
She did reach out to me and was kind of messaging me. And I was actually more open to it than my brother was. So my older brother, him and I are only full-blood siblings. I've got like step-siblings and half-brother and stuff like that. But he was actually born over in Korea before they came over. So my dad was military, which is how I met my mom. But he was actually born over there and they came over and I was born here. But he like refuses to have anything to do with her. Like she's reached out to him on social media and he's like, she's dead to him. But for me, I was a little bit more accepting because I didn't get any of that. I was a baby when she left.
and how old is he?
He's 3 years older than me, so he's about 3, yeah. And then I saw her once when I was able to recognize her. So my brother was in the hospital, his appendix bursted when he was 12, so I was 9. She came back while he was in the hospital just to visit him, and then she was gone. I never saw her again. So I did get one like experience with her, but I I didn't get experience with that, and I grew up with all these different stepmoms, and so I kind of wanted that like mother figure. So I kind of let her back in a little bit, but it's just through social media, so there's not much that you can really regain through that.
Have you thought about going to visit?
Not her particularly, but I would love to go to South Korea to visit, just because I would love to just experience more of the culture like in person.
So also a little bit too, like growing up with just your dad and not having like that, you know, Korean side of your mother and that lineage and heritage and like family all behind you. Like, how did that feel growing up? I mean, did your dad foster any kind of like helping you with your identity? Like,
not really. I mean, other than me like going to that Korean church, like we went to like this barber. She was Korean, or she was Asian. I don't know if she was Korean. She was Asian.
But she still is.
She still is. She still is, as far as I know.
I feel like she's still Korean.
We went to get our haircut from her, but other than that, no, not really.
Maybe that's love, because it's hard for non-Asian barbers to understand Asian hair. Sometimes.
Yeah. Asian hair is a tough thing. Still don't know that. But no, not really. He didn't really facilitate any kind of anything to help me come to terms with like culture and all that. But
Has your brother had children?
he has.
Okay. Sometimes it changes after they have children, then they realize. Some parents have an awakening, like, okay, well, this isn't the easiest thing in the world, and people have to make decisions the best that they can at that time.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, if you're comfortable sharing, like, your coming out story, like, what that was like, and engaging with the Korean church and their acceptance level of that.
So I actually went to the Korean church when I was just a child. I stopped going to church.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, I probably stopped going to church when I was like 12 or something. You know, like I went from like age like 7 or 8 to like age 12, and then I started going after. So I don't think of myself as a religious person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I stopped when I was 12. So yeah.
Yeah. So
That's a rebellious teenager.
Right.
But no. So,
What about like your family acceptance with your coming out?
So I was fortunate enough that I actually have a lesbian aunt. So I feel like she paved that road for me.
Nice. Yeah.
So it was super easy for me. I was actually more afraid to tell my friends. So coming out of a fraternity.
Oh, yes.
Because I actually didn't come out until right after college.
Oh.
So
What was their response?
Actually, everyone was very accepting. Like
I was like, no.
We had no idea.
You know, being a college cheerleader, you would.
Like, I was like, are you college cheerleader? It's like, guys, I totally have something to tell you. Hold on. Everyone, let's go.
No, it was pretty easy. I mean, everyone was just like, oh, cool. I still like you for who you are, and we're still your friends.
Oh,
so.
explains the cheerleading.
They're like, is this why you didn't have as many girls over as the rest of us?
Oh.
Probably.
I can only brush on the chair. Hands for braiding. That's interesting. How do you identify it? I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
Cis, heterosexual,
I know all those words.
Yes.
not married, but partnered for 9 years now.
Oh, nice.
That's not marriage.
That's
A long time.
That's common law.
Still like each other after a year of quarantine and
That's huge.
Together.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a
Yeah.
big test. That's a big test.
That is a big test. Are you single?
I am single. Yeah, I was dating through quarantine. We broke up about end of November. beginning of December.
Quarantine broke it up. It was like, this is too much.
Did you quarantine together, or?
We did quarantine together. No, quarantine didn't break us up. We just realized we have 2 very different communication styles, and we just kind of needed to focus on ourselves and work on our communication styles. We're still friends.
wow.
It's very peaceful and amicable.
Very grown.
I know.
I want the dirt. So if you're watching this, I want you to know. I broke up with you.
It was
That's awesome.
I want to jump into like asking about your work with HIV. Like, what impact did that have on you?
I mean, I started volunteering in HIV when I was in high school in the early 90s because that's when it was, still very bad, and I heard about this disease and thought, what is happening? And there was a program at my school to teach middle school students. It was called Teens Hope, Helping Others Through Peer Education. And you would learn the curriculum and then tell the middle school students about
What?
HIV.
Wow.
Yes.
I really went to a stupid school. High school didn't have anything cool like that.
That is so cool.
It was like, you can read, I guess you can go to another class.
Yeah.
But then I began my career. I went to college for microbiology and cell biology, and I thought I would just be a scientist forever, but I spent 7 years trying to create an HIV vaccine as a scientist. But I do not like laboratory. I'm like a super extrovert, so working 8 hours a day in a lab was not suited for my personality. Even though it was super exciting to me to be like, why couldn't it be us? And actually that lab created the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
That's incredible.
So this person, I worked at Harvard for the first 3 years after I graduated from KU, and this postdoc who had just started, who was my age, has now taken over the lab, and he, because of all the advancements that they've been working on HIV vaccines throughout the years, they were able to just plug in the COVID sequences into one of the existing HIV
That's cool.
templates, and then scale it up very quickly, and that's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine now.
Wow. It's simple, just like that.
You're right, like you just
totally.
plug and play.
Yes.
Yeah.
But even then, I volunteered always. So there, I lived in Boston, and that was where I first got exposure to a lot of people who were dealing with substance use, and that was something that was very unfamiliar and at first very uncomfortable to me, just because I didn't know about persons who were using injection drugs and persons who, had grown up and lived their entire life in public housing projects and things like that. So that's when I was really awakened to some internal stigma that I had, which showed me that I needed to learn about this, that feeling of discomfort, even though I was serving as like a phone a friend or an in-person friend for these persons that have HIV and were still engaged in these activities. And so it really took me knowing those people personally and their story to learn more about those. So I think a lot of times it is when you feel that discomfort to be like, why am I feeling this? This is internal stigma, and realizing you should actually be curious about it. And
you gotta lean into
use
it.
Yeah,
You
to
just gotta
learn.
lean into it.
Yeah. Not shy away from it.
Yeah. And then I worked on microbicides for a long time, so we still have a long way to go with that. I worked on clinical trials for gels that could prevent pregnancy and HIV. And we have a lot of things like that coming down the pipeline still. Rings, gels. There's even a film that looks like one of those mouse strips,
Oh.
All sorts of things that just are dissolvable things that could either prevent pregnancy or kill STIs.
Do you eat it? Or just put it on your butthole or your wiener?
Yeah, you could stick it in your vagina. Yeah.
I mean,
Or a butt.
does it make your vagina smell like spearmint?
No.
Or
No,
it's like
that was a fast no.
maybe
Not
that's
a
our
dental
first-
day
that
out.
was our
Not a
first
dental
question. Yeah. Noted.
I have seen many a dental dam. I ended up teaching human sexuality at UMKC. So then I ended up training family planning clinicians all over the country at 4,000 Title X clinics. And realizing that a lot of these clinicians who tend to be older, 40s to 60s, partially because younger people are not going into that field because their student loan debt is so much higher than it used to be to work as an advanced practice nurse or PA. I realized that a lot of them had some gaps about gender and current issues, and still, even though they've been working in family planning and talking about sex every day at their job, there was still a level of discomfort about certain topics, which has a huge impact on the populations that you're trying to help. So I proposed a class to teach human sexuality to undergrads who want to work in health professions, because anyone working in any sort of health profession is going to have to talk about pregnancy or STIs or healthy relationships or gender or anything at some point. And it's great. So It was a job that I never thought I would do. We never talked about sex in my house growing up. But
That was my follow-up. Yeah.
I feel like I didn't know anything about sex, but I feel like that's when you know, that was a gap for me that didn't benefit me, and it would be great if people could change that going forward, especially when it comes to healthcare, because if you want the entire experience for anybody coming to a health clinic to be welcoming, no matter what. They are there for help and health care, and people need to be informed about pronouns and transgender individuals and persons of different race ethnicities and all sorts of concerns. So it was a great job. I totally miss it. But I taught for 5 years, and then it's still it's a required class now for all undergraduate health students at UMBC, which is awesome. Who knew that they manage the data for 2 of the longest running HIV studies at the CDC? So,
And you love it!
I do like data. I kind of miss the personal interactions, but that's why I always volunteer. So I'm also on the board of the AIDS Service Foundation and on their Education and Outreach Committee. So just because I like working on the science, but I always feel disconnected from, that somehow feels disconnected to me from the actual communities that I'm trying to help. So I'd like to be engaged in other ways to have more of a connection to community service related to HIV, which is kind of it's a struggle and a big change as well lately. That organization, we were having a lot of discussions about how it's an organization that people associate as being, older white men, and how are we going to change and evolve to meet the changing needs of diverse populations all throughout the metro area.
And would that be the AIDS Service Foundation?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm still taken aback about you volunteering when you're in high school. Just growing up. Also too, I feel like maybe we had sex ed in middle school, but I think I was absent those days. I don't know, or I was on it. No.
It was like a help.
Because I did,
it's definitely
it was like
But
very
also,
teacher or gym teacher.
we didn't have anything like that I wish I would have. And when I finally traveled, I moved to San Diego, and I was hanging out with that kid. There used to be a group called the Rubber Boys, and they basically were kind of what the HIP Project does, and they go around and they do testing and HIV prevention, and they had a van, food truck type of thing, but it was all like that. And so I used to volunteer for that, and we used to have a house, a drop-in house for youth.
That's cool.
And on the main floor and in the basement, they had games foosball and video games and stuff. And so a lot of homeless youth and at-risk teens would go there on the weekends and stuff, and I would go and do talk, and then I would just hang out and play games with them and get to meet them. It was very, very interesting and very surreal, but also I remember when I finally left and I was gonna go come out to my parents, my dad and my family, and I don't know, it's just all these kids that were homeless and that were abused and didn't have definitely street kids, and there I was too afraid to tell my dad that I was gay, and they were just oh my god, you're so awesome and you do so many cool things, and I was you're awesome because I'm scared and you're living your truth. I wish I would have had more opportunities to do things like that when I was younger, or even had doors open to even talk about things like that.
I mean, it kind of makes sense because if you're in middle school, you're probably going to be less open to having a discussion about HIV with a teacher. But if it's somebody from early high school, sophomore in high school, then you may be okay, well, I'm going to listen to what they're saying. Plus, at that time, people were still dying a lot.
Yeah.
There is a new youth housing opportunity in Kansas City right now that's associated with Save Inc. So for
Pride House.
I think it's Pride House.
Pride Haven.
Pride Haven, yes.
Pride Haven. Yeah, they had opened right before COVID, and then COVID happened and they had to shut down, but they just reopened.
Yep. So
Yeah,
it's LGBT drop in, and you can stay the night, and you can do laundry, or you can just hang out.
And they have people that are you can talk to, counselors.
Social
They
workers.
have social workers. They have what is it called? Where you can use computers and
your
lab. So they'll help you with resumes or finding jobs or connecting with people.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Life
awesome.
skills. That's awesome.
And our spot just launched too. That's through STARS program. And that's a partnership with Avenue of Life on the KCK side. And so that's for homeless LGBTQI youth, and then individuals who are phasing out of the foster care system, and you have no place to go. And so this is a place to get them set up.
Were there any like programs or things that you learned growing up, like that had to do with HIV, health, sex? Was that something that your family talked about, or you just kind of like winged it and went to fraternity and you're like, this is what we do?
No, so so I went to Manhattan, Kansas, but we actually had, like, health was a required semester of schooling in high school. We did it in middle school as well, but like in high school you had to do 1 semester of health. So I had a full semester of classes of just learning about all the things. So, but I don't feel like we talked about HIV that much in health.
I feel really fucking shafted with my public education.
No
First of all, like, right? Like, I feel really shafted.
Yeah. My mom sat me down in front of the Oprah episode with Brian White, and that was our.
That's so traumatic for a kid to watch.
That was my HIV experience, and there was no like family discussion. It was just like, watch this episode. You need to come in here and watch this, and then that was it. Okay, yeah, you can go
think
play.
like, oh my god, that could happen to me. What if I have hemophilia?
Yeah, we never
I
talked
could be
about
dying.
it. Yeah, that was our extent. And then I think my mom gave me a sex talk when I was 16, and we were driving home from school, and she was like, I just want to talk to you about sex. And I was like, it's too late, but you should probably talk to my brother. You should start with him.
Yes, you should be starting way early. So now a lot of my friends are having kids or have had kids, but there are so many tools to incorporate with your child from when they're very young, from like board books. It should just be integrated into their entire reading experience because it's available for every age group of how to normalize things on a level that they can comprehend to start normalizing the conversation.
And even in households where it's normalized, like in our household, we'll talk about, because I'm like, it's my job, so we talk about it at the dinner table, like things that we learned about that day at work or something. And for our daughter, it's just like, I don't want to look at you. Can I look at you? We were talking about mouth hugs the other day, and she was like, I don't want to know. I just want to leave.
I wonder what that conversation's like with her and her friends when they start talking. She's like, first of all, you're wrong. How do you know, virgin? And she's like, oh, you see my dad.
And do you think that's because of, like, with everything that's out there, the internet, all the different apps and stuff, they're exposed to it at a younger age versus, like, when we were younger, we didn't have all that.
Yes.
Most definitely. I mean, I remember seeing the first, like, porno mag.
Yes.
You're right.
It was, like, hard to get a porno mag. So it was like, if somebody got one, then everybody had to be like, okay, let us all see, because we need to know what's going on in there.
Yeah. I remember looking at the boys, or the guys.
I remember looking at a Playgirl once, and this guy was just like on a desert island with his boat marooned, and then it's just like giant cock, and I'm like,
there.
really? He's just like there by himself. He's just there by himself.
Use that thing to
He could have.
Also, speaking of HIV, it is National Asian HIV/AIDS Awareness Day on May 19th.
Yes. Yes.
So this was started in 2005 to increase awareness, decrease stigma, with Asian Americans to get tested, talk about it. There's lots of cultural issues related to Asians and HIV. One is getting tested, also just access to healthcare. Some are worried about immigration status, language barriers, more tendency to be involved in Eastern medicine to keep up their treatments, and just a variety of issues. But again, in the Asian culture, it's not common, as a generality, not as common to speak openly about sex education, sexual experiences. So hopefully this day can help raise awareness. And then there's also like a data problem and a research problem with not being that much data or research on what is actually going on with the vast diaspora of Asian experiences as it relates to HIV and STIs. People think that it's like such a small percent because it's only 6% of the U.S. population or something, and their HIV rates are only 2% of the overall HIV. But it's like they, like many other smaller other cultural groups, get lumped into other when they're being reported on. So it's like they put Native Americans in there, they put Asians in there. It's like anybody under 10% gets just lumped into one. So you can't actually keep track of the trends as much if you're not really reporting on and then just thinking of the Asian diaspora, like what's going on with all of the different ethnicities, and the Pacific Islander experience is also very different than East Asians, and so lots of issues.
And I was just thinking that, is it part of like that, the demographic tracking that they do when they ask those questions when you get tested, like, about race and how you identify, that if an individual doesn't feel confident or that they're in a space to say that they're Asian, they're just a white, or they go Native American or something along those lines. So they're not even being documented or captured in actually what's taking place in their community.
Well, in federal reporting, when did they actually start capturing transgender? Within the last 5 years.
Oh, yeah, I was like,
officially, within the last 5 years. So even if you look at the outstanding data because of the national data lag, they're still reporting from like 2018, 2019 statistics because of the data lag. They're not even including transgender still because they have not made the change. So it's very frustrating.
Well, I feel like a lot of transgender people, like humans, aren't really upfront with like sharing all that information as well. I mean, it hasn't even been like in the past like 5 years that people like it's a safety issue. And coming back to like Asian culture too, like reporting stuff and seeing doctors and stuff, I'm not real familiar, but I know that like in Black culture, like historically, like them like not as the people like having issues with going to medical professionals and people in authority, like it's been such an issue because of
they were using all the
horrible things that white people did to them.
Exactly.
And there's a whole segment of Asian culture in United States that are not in history books of like what a lot of white people in this country did to that demographic. And do you still see and find that there's a lot of hesitation when it comes to certain things that I think are just should be afforded to everybody, like healthcare, like calling the police, like asking for help or reaching out because of, and something even like inside yourself. I think we were talking about, what was one of the questions that you said? Something about like,
how can someone be an ally or an advocate for Asians, like who are experiencing racism or discrimination? Like what does that look like? What does an ally or an advocate look like for you?
My partner is white, and he was raised in a family where that was and continues to be part of his entire life, just the conversation. So his grandparents were farmers from Southwest Kansas, but they moved to Kansas City to get involved with the civil rights movement. They just were moved by what was going on here, and they were social workers, and they ended up befriending a lot of Black Panthers and are are still friends with some who are in exile and things like that. But his grandparents had specifically moved to the east side of town and were the only white family there, and his dad ended up being reintegrated, like bused to a white school because he was living there, but they always had, like activists sleeping in campers in their driveway and things like that. And so he went to a predominantly African American high school and so with Lincoln, and so hearing from him about how African American history is mandatory there, I believe, or was when he was in high school, and that he knows so much more about that from all of his family conversations, and his dad still serves on More Squared and all these racial justice things, and it's just a part of their family culture. So I think it's really interesting and probably unique, but it's conversations that they're continually having. And his brother is finishing his PhD in like African American studies and gender studies. Yeah. But it's like an example of how to be an actionable ally, which is something that I think is useful to learn. And somebody who's our board advisor who is African American and serves on our Asian board, is you don't have to be one of us to be one of us. Like you can actually, the president of our Asian organization is not Asian. She is an ally who had gotten involved with the employee resource group at Hallmark and really befriended and became passionate about the work, and I think exemplifies that you can really be an actionable ally even if you're not from my group. But then, if you work at a bigger corporation, this is my first corporate job, but we have those employee resource groups for Asians, and I think that's another way, if you work at a place like that you can get involved, because I, at Cerner, have gone to a lot of other groups that I was less familiar with. So we have one that's called True Ability, that's for persons with disabilities, and that's not something that I was familiar with. So just going to those speakers and learning more about their challenges and their experiences and how you can help their causes or create better workplaces for them or something like that. It's like that is a step to being an ally in one way. Yeah. And so just, learning about these other cultures, communities is kind of the first step. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. I think for me, everyone with social media being such a big thing, we all have a voice in the platform. And I think you've seen it with the Black Lives Matter movement. And then there was kind of a little bit of movement with Stop Asian Hate. Like being able to pause what you're doing in your daily life and using your platform, using your voice to really shed light on these social injustices. Like, I know for me, like, obviously I'm Asian American, so I'm going to speak towards that part of it. But also, I realized with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, I stopped all of my posting, stopped posting my thirst traps, on my Instagram, because I really wanted that to be a place and a resource for people to get the information that they needed. And I think for me, using your platform and your voice is a great way to be an ally. And showing people that it's like, I hear you, I see you, I'm with you, Yeah. And people who do that, hopefully they're doing it for the right causes, not because everyone else posted it out there, so I'm going to take one thing, post it, and look, I'm an ally. But really, posting things to get information out there and, showing your support for your friends or, people that you may know that are of that race. I think that speaks volumes to me versus, the people who are silent and say nothing. It's like you have this platform, and if you're not using it, then it's like, okay, I see where you're at with things. So.
I think there's a lot of ways you can learn. Number one, do a little quick deep dive, spend an hour learning about Asian American history or the Asian American experience, especially right now. There's a lot of information available.
Yes.
You can donate money always to causes that you think are important, whether it's a one-time donation of work that like Asian Americans Against Justice or Stop AAPI Hate, or if somebody's story resonates with you. I guess just caring about the experience of humans who are different than you and having enough curiosity and care to think about their life and then learn and hopefully celebrate the differences. Because really all the divisiveness is like tearing us apart in America, and
Oh,
white supremacy wins when we're all against each other. So
yeah. We really are stronger together.
Yes.
That really does pan out. Yeah.
I think also like the see something, say something. Like
Yes.
if you see something out in public, like standing up.
Yeah, it's not just a social media post. Like you have to put action to those words. Like
100%.
if your friend makes an Asian joke, call it out.
yeah, like that's inappropriate.
Punch them in the face.
You can take multiple
Publicly humiliate
ways.
them. Pull their hair.
That's why I like to pull their pants down, like
Bite them.
shame them.
Just kidding, I don't promote physical violence.
You talked earlier about the model minority, and like, what impact did that myth have on you, like, as growing up?
Hold on.
Well, I guess we should say,
People that are not familiar with model
Yes.
minority, do you want to explain what that is?
It's actually kind of was influenced a little bit by immigration policy. That immigration policy gave preference to a lot of persons that had letters that came after their name, like MD, nurses, etc. And that's who they wanted immigrating here, especially from Asian countries. So that kind of helped contribute to the idea that all Asians are smart, and their healthcare workers are scientists, and they're just. The perception of Asians being the minority.
Wait, so that's not true?
it's another stereotype, yeah.
I mean, I am a scientist and I work in health, and I do have letters after my name.
I'm not good at math.
Same.
But it's the idea that Asians do not cause trouble, and they're more white adjacent, and they just kind of keep their heads down and are obedient. But this is actually disservice to the very broad array of Asian experiences. And this is also mostly only when people think about, I don't know, even when you think about what Asian is, people think of East Asians when it is just such a huge diaspora. There's South Asians, and what's going on in India right now. When you mentioned COVID earlier, it's okay, first who was being attacked are persons that appeared to be Chinese looking to people that did not know. Of course, that was many people that were not Chinese, but a lot of people do not know how to distinguish. And now the COVID racism is changing to be against Southeast Asians who are suspected to be Indian, that they are carrying variants, and that that they're carrying disease. People are leaving notes saying if you do not associate with any Indians, they're carrying these dangerous variants. So just all of these stereotypes.
I can see that going in hand in hand with the rise of the infections in that country, and so it's just permeating out. Of course, all those people now are infected, so you can't trust any of them.
But really, they just need so much help.
Yeah,
that country needs an enormous amount of help right now, and in our Asian group at work, we have a lot of associates that work there, and they are just struggling. And they everyone either has a friend or a family member who has died.
Oh my God.
And they're just burning bodies in the streets, and it is dire. But when you're in America, we can walk into any drugstore right now and get a vaccine. And sometimes, we also hoard the vaccines. So when I worked on HIV vaccine development for one of my jobs, I only worked on strains for African strains of HIV. And at the time, I thought that was important because that's who really needs it the most. So we tried to design things that could be desiccated and not have to have, be frozen, and all these things related to that specific country. But at the time, that was by far the greatest need. Anyways, I'm going off on a million tangents. But the model minority still exists.
You're talking, I'm learning stuff, and I'm this is, wow.
So lots of things. I would say a couple of different stereotypical concepts related to Asians. One is monominority. The second is being a perpetual foreigner, that if you look Asian, you are not from here. People always see you as being foreigner and not an American, and that you do not belong here. And this is also the impetus for a lot of attacks that have been going on lately, and you hear that these perpetrators say things like, you don't belong here, get out of our country, and a lot of these people are born and raised here, or people, say,
Like
where are you from?
Yeah, the second generation. Like you've been born, like Kansas City, Topeka, like.
When you talked about earlier too about how like Asians are very obedient, like they conform to the white cultures and stuff like that, and like I think that has downplayed the level of racism that people have towards Asians as well. People think it's okay to make jokes. It's not racist. It's just a joke, But it's like, no, that is racism. Like, just because we're Asian and we're obedient and whatnot, like it's still not okay.
Yeah. And also less likely to report it until recently, when there's like national hotlines now for reporting. But Asians who were victims of hate crimes or verbal abuse would just take it and not share that information with anyone.
You mentioned that Subtle Asians group on Facebook. I'm a part of it as well. And like during
Subtle Asian trees.
Subtle Asian trees. And
It's a very large group.
They during COVID, like you saw all the people who like posted like photos of themselves after being attacked because people were like, "You got COVID," like, or like, "You guys brought this into our country," and like just all these people posting photos and videos of them getting harassed, attacked, and it was.
How does that make you feel? Like, I mean, living your everyday life and going outside, knowing that some idiot kid.
Seeing images of people that look like you.
Yeah, it was sickening. Actually, I've actually had someone call me COVID. I've been called it already. So.
Like in passing, or
yeah. So it was actually at a bar here in Kansas City. It was right before.
Oh my God, which one?
It was 303.
Shocked.
I was at 303.
Who was shocked by that?
Oh my gosh! A gay person called you COVID.
Yeah, so it was right before.
What was his name?
I actually don't know who it was. I don't know who it was. It was an older white man. But I was,
Shocking.
right.
Still, yeah.
And I was just in the bar with some friends, just drinking like normal. This was right before, it kind of hit here before lockdown shut down. And I was out having a drink, and he walked by me. He whispered COVID, just loud enough for me and my friends to hear it.
Wow.
And I turned to him and was like, "What did you say?" Yeah. And then he's like, "Nothing." He's like, "Nothing. I was just flirting." And I was like, "Okay."
Wow.
Let me take a minute to educate you. I was like, first of all, people in other countries are experiencing hardship. I was like, that's not funny to make fun of. That's not cute. It's not a joke. I was like, and because I'm Asian, I was like, it's even more offensive because you're implying that I brought this over here. So yeah, I just kind of had like a moment of being like, no, this isn't cute. It's not.
What was this person's response?
It was just like, I was just joking.
And was he with friends?
He was by himself at that moment.
Okay, and were you with friends?
I was with friends.
What was the response that your friends had when they were like, I'm gonna let this bitch have it, some shit.
Well,
I
was with my ex at the time, and he was pissed. He's like, he wanted to go off on the guy, but I was like, no. I was like, we're not gonna yell. We're gonna be civil. And I was like,
do you like rock paper scissors?
Who's gonna go off?
Who's gonna go off?
Oh, no, it was me. I was like, I'm the Asian one. I was like, I feel like it's my duty to educate him and kind of put him in his place.
Did you walk away from that conversation feeling like you educated, or feeling like he's just gonna be an asshole? Like,
oh, he's probably gonna be an asshole, but that's the other thing in the LGBTQIA plus community is that like we're already at odds, fighting for equality and acceptance in society, and so it's always frustrating and disappointing for me that someone within that community who knows that hardship will take a group of people and exclude them. Like you see it all the time on apps, like no Asians, no blacks, but it's like
no fats,
no femmes. It's like you already know what it's like to feel excluded, and then to take it a step further and exclude someone else. It's like it's so disappointing and so frustrating.
Well, it's like unfortunate too that you think about it. Like usually, a lot of people that are doing that excluding and saying things like that are like white men.
Right?
Yeah.
So like that privilege transcends even through LGBTQIA plus. Like,
Yeah, they're holding on to the last vestige of what they think is power.
yeah,
Right.
which is unfortunate and sad and really fucking disgusting.
It is, and the fact that you said flirting.
Yeah,
like, I'm
it's
sticking on
flirting.
that. Like that is how you want to flirt with me.
Right. I was like, I don't care how drunk you are. That is not flirting.
I have a question about that too. Like, so do you use apps? Do you use?
I don't have any.
Do you have like? Have you ever like in your experience, obviously being a gay man, and being Asian, do you get fetishized or?
I've had both sides of the spectrum. Yeah, I've had people who are like, sorry, I'm not into Asians, you know. And
So you're like, hey, I'm into Asians.
and then you have other people who are like, yeah, exactly. You get that. You get that. We're like, it's like
sounds
really
like a compliment, but it doesn't feel like a compliment when you say that.
Right. Like they fetishize that darker skin. They're like, I love tan boys, or like, you know, a lot of people are into like Asians or Hispanics. You know, like you get that. So I've had both sides of the
I'm with women. I think too, like the fetishized part would be like, because stereotypically, like, you know, they're more docile, they're softer, they're more submissive, and
right.
so I mean they get fetishized, I'm sure, as well.
You also get the things where they're like, oh, I've never been with an Asian until you. You know, like,
Oh my God.
Oh
yeah, you get that sometimes too. So it's like, oh, you're my first Asian.
And also, like, you're like, that's actually like, you should never ever say
never,
that.
yeah.
Never say that like sentence out loud ever again. Like, that's not a compliment. Like, it's kind of rude. It's disrespectful. Like, never say those things out loud. I mean, I can't change your thought process, but say less.
Say less.
No, say less.
Yeah, people, it's I don't know, a culture that, I don't know, like, it's just, maybe it's also, like, growing up, like, in Southwest Kansas, like, the politeness and stuff, but, like, people are just so, and then when you try to correct them about things that are offensive, they're like, they get offended, like, what?
Right.
How dare you? I'm not being rude. Like, that's actually really rude to, like, say those things or ask those things. Like you said earlier, one of my triggering things is, like, Wes knows this, and, like, I try to be polite, but never, ever, ever fucking ask me where I'm from. And I've had people like, oh, like, where are you from? Like, you know, casual conversations like, oh, I'm from South, originally Southwest Kansas, I moved to Lodge. Like, oh, no, but, like, where are you from?
Yeah.
Right.
Where are
I'm
you?
from Dodge City. I've never, like, where's, like, your parents from? I'm like, well, why do you know Tim? Like, he's born in a small town in Colorado? Like, I don't know. Like, no, like, from, like, where are you from? Like, what's your nationality? I'm like, wow, I literally just met you like 30 seconds ago, and also like that has no bearing on this conversation until now, and now I hate you, go away.
Yeah. Have you ever also been asked,
what are you?
is Chris your American name? Because you know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So like, some Asians they'll have an American name, and so they'll be like, oh, is Chris your American name? I'm like, no, Chris is my given name.
So Kimberly, you said this. You said that earlier. Like, where are you from?
I mean, I thought it was strange growing up because I didn't ever view myself as even looking Asian American, and people would actually thought of me more as part Native American when I was growing up because I couldn't really place my look, but they still thought that I looked strange or different than other people, which I thought was...
I think you mean pretty.
No, I did not think I was pretty until I moved to Boston, and then I would get hit on all the time, and I was like, wow, well, I've been living in the Midwest, and like, nobody appreciated me there. What
does that mean? Like, what is that for? Is it trying to find your people, or is it like casual racism within an Asian community, or is it like...
there is a lot of racism between the communities.
What is the need to know, and like why? Like, what's the... I mean, I don't historically know. Maybe countries were fighting. I don't know how that works. Like, I don't know.
Whether it's class systems too, so depending on where the individual's from.
Oh, kind of how we're just like, oh, we're really smart, but like you're from the South. I'm like, oh, so you're your sister and you can't read. Like, okay, that kind of makes sense to me now.
I'm guessing sometimes too, it's part of like they want to be relatable to you in a sense. Like, so I have an older Chinese man who works out at the gym that I work at, and he'll always come up to me and he'll be like, "Are you Korean?" And then I'll be like, "Yes, I'm half Korean," and then he'll like just tell me things he knows about like Korea. So it's like he's trying to be relatable. Yeah, he's trying to be relatable. So I think it's a little of everything. Like you said, it could be some racism within our own race, or it could be just like getting to know each other, or just curiosity.
So it could come down to the intention behind it. Yeah. And the person still the person that's coming from. Because if it was an older white man who came up and asked you that, that's not going to be, it's not going to feel the same.
It's like,
I mean, I get that.
It's like, you are Korean! And then he just like attacks you, it's like immediate like fight or something. I knew it!
As we're getting ready to like wrap this up, like what would be some advice that has helped you in your life that you would want to share for others?
Oh,
Ooh.
cash up front.
I think just be authentic, you know.
Chris, what about you?
I'm still thinking. I don't know. I think just that everyone is beautiful in their own right. I know it sounds cliche, but like I very much like I'm like
I'm just kidding.
But I see it. The thing is like I feel like there's something special and unique about every single person, and just try to focus on those good things. Maybe they're not the most attractive, but I'm sure there's other great qualities about them.
Ace, what are you thinking about?
I was just thinking about how you were talking about like being authentic, and that's really important. And two, you're like, I don't check all these boxes, and you were just like, and I don't. Well, I'm in like corporate world or whatever, but like here I am. Like I'm still here, so I'm still gonna like be who I am. I don't feel like, and I feel like there's a lot of people that, going back to that conversation about like how am I as a white person, am I just gonna walk into like, you know, a black neighborhood or a brown neighborhood and be like, hey, let's talk and be friends, and what can I do to help, or like what are we, you know what I mean? And it's just showing up is really important for a lot of things, and not just for other people and other things, but like showing up for yourself and knowing that I don't feel comfortable here, but I'm still here. Like, it doesn't change the fact that I'm in this situation, so I might as well be authentic and stand up for myself and be who I am and like move forward in that. Going back to things too, just making sure like that I'm a big proponent of, I'm very direct. People think that it's like aggressive because I'm so direct, and I'm like, no, because people kind of pussyfoot around a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think like I'm very confrontational, because if we have issues, like I would rather squash them instead of like walk around on eggshells anytime that I see you. And I think a lot of people get afraid of that, but it's like part of being authentic is, and being an adult is that when things get really hard and things are really tough, instead of shying away from them and like hiding yourself, like lean into those things, because that's when you're going to find the most growth. That's when you're going to on friendships, like, you know, either tie them up and be better friends, or dissipate and be done completely and not have to worry about it. And same thing like with jobs, like you lean into things, and I don't feel like I'm incorporated or that I belong here, but the reality is I'm here, so like lean into it and be better.
Sure, it says it all. You are.
Yes.
I think that's important.
You have a voice and you have a platform. Use it.
Use it. Yeah.
And
Use
if
it
you
for
see
good.
something, say something.
Yeah, definitely. I'll see you, hey!
Well, where can people find out information about
It's called NAP.
NAP?
Love that.
Oh my gosh.
NAAAP. 3 A's. NAP.org.
Triple
I mean, this organization is a national organization with 30 chapters and like 25,000 members. And we have a lot of, one of our newest board members is Korean American and from a small town. And she just still, even though she's been involved with us for maybe 9 months, she still like freaks out and will stop during our meetings and just is like, I cannot believe I'm on a Zoom call with 20 other people that look like me. It just like blows her mind, and she's just like, I have found my people, and it's like intergenerational. You know, there's people in their 60s, there's people in their 20s, and all over. People are from all different backgrounds of professionalism. It's not like a study business thing. It's really just to kind of improve yourself as a person and create community. But there are in a lot of them like CEOs, and it's like great for networking throughout the entire country, but also just, you know, I wish I had it when I was younger. Like Wichita just launched their chapter of National Association of Asian American Professionals, and they have all these amazing speakers. They launched like 2 months ago, and I'm already like, I follow their social media, and I'm like, look at Wichita. They just had this big event at this like yacht club there, and there was like 40 Asian people there, and I'm like, go Wichita, that's so cool. I'm in the Kansas City chapter, but there's chapters all over the country.
Nice.
AIDS Service Foundation, we have a fabulous new website, asfgkc.com, AIDS Service Foundation of Greater Kansas City, because we're not exclusive to only Kansas City limits. And I'm on social media as Casey Kimchi.
Chris, what about you? Where can people find more information about Stonewall Sports?
Yeah, we are getting ready to start our season on Sunday. So it's the LGBTQIA and Ally Sports League here in Kansas City.
This is our first year doing it. Unboxed does have a
Yeah,
team.
we're excited.
We do start on Sunday, which is really good. And I would probably say, like, I'm captaining, and Bo is our co-captain. And
Yes.
I would say that I maybe know half the team, and the other half I don't know at all.
Yeah,
I'm super excited.
Asian, we
You've got a lot of
Yeah,
agents.
I'm super
Awesome.
excited to, number one, be outside and hang out with people, meet a bunch of new fun humans, and experience something that I feel like was bringing our city together. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Yes.
We need that sense of community.
Stonewall Sports is great.
Yes, we do. Yeah.